In 2003, the CIA declassified a document regarding the gateway process, a study on how meditation can teach humans to harness their own electromagnetic energy waves and use them to essentially detach their consciousness from time and space. Today, we're going to deconstruct this document and go through its details, which admittedly get a bit crazy, going so far as to say our universe is a hologram. This subject will be a two-part series, so let's get right into it. Welcome, my friends, to As Within, So Without. My name is Riley Finwood, and I was supposed to record this episode yesterday. However, I had to mow the lawn. And I know what you're thinking. Did it take you all day to mow the lawn, Riley? And I have to tell you a little bit of a story. Yes, it did. And here's why. First of all, it took me forever to get out of bed, all right? Things are rough right now. I know that's not an excuse, but it is actually the best excuse in the world. I mean, look around you. Just look around you. It's hard out here for all of us right now. Number two, I lost the key to the shed. I always keep it in the same place, and I lost the key to the shed that is padlocked. And I tried to break into my own shed for hours. I went to the hardware store and I got bolt cutters and a new padlock. Came back, found out I was too weak to use the bolt cutters. And I had to call a friend over to help me unlock my own problem that I created. Eventually we got it open and I was able to mow the lawn at around 8 o'clock p.m., which was great, actually, a blessing in disguise because it was so hot outside. But now I can't lock my shed, so until I can get a new locking mechanism, it's the mechanism we had to break, not the padlock, my shed's just wide open. So hopefully no one sees my very expensive lawnmower in there. Anyway, how are y'all doing? This episode is very exciting to me. It is about a research project that the CIA did all the way back in the 80s, and then they decided to release it to the public September 10th, 2003. So it's been released for 17 years now. I think people are just starting, at least in my circles, just starting to take it up and look at it, and it seems to have inspired a lot of spirituality thinking recently. I know this stuff's always been around, but I think it's the scientific aspect of it is really bolstering a lot of current, I don't want to say self-help, but kind of self-help spirituality methods. Like, I know I mentioned briefly last time, Dr. Joe Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural. There's a lot of similarities between what he talks about and what is spoken about in these declassified papers. But we'll get into that. Eventually, I want to do an episode just on that book and draw comparisons between the two here, because I think Joe Dispenza's book is more of a continuation of what is happening here, which I think is important, always evolving. He doesn't mention anything about the universe being a hologram, but we're going to get to the hologram stuff. That stuff's pretty important to what's happening here. So, so let's get into it. We're going to start with the background and the thesis of this document. Let me let my cat out of the room before he bothers me. Hold on. So the man writing the report is Commander Wayne M. McDonnell, and he was a part of the U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command in Fort George G. Meade in Maryland. The project really focuses on the biomedical models developed by Itzhak Bentov. Itzhak, I-T-Z-H-A-K. Could be pronouncing that completely incorrectly. I apologize. Anyway, So it was Bentov's job to obtain information regarding the physical aspects of the process. It uses principles of quantum mechanics to aid in the description of the nature and functioning of human consciousness. It then contrasts a model that is scientifically valid and reasonably lucid that show how consciousness functions under the influence of brain hemisphere synchronization. Then, they bring it back down to theoretical physics and try to explain the character of time-space as it relates to human consciousness. They found it necessary to use physics to, quote, bring down the whole phenomenon of out-of-body states into the language of physical science to remove the stigma of its occult connotations and put it in a frame of reference suited to objective assessment, which is a really good way to summarize this podcast as a whole. That's sort of what I try to do. I try to look beyond the whole esoteric, supernatural, occult stuff and see, I want to look behind the veil in things, and I want to see if there is a scientific explanation. I don't mean an explanation as in like a debunking. I mean an explanation of, in a way that it doesn't diminish its magical effects. The fact that we can prove these things scientifically, perhaps one day, it makes it 10 times more amazing to me. Anyway, early on, they reference a Niels Bohr quote, who, this was when he was speaking to his son, who was complaining about the obtuse nature of physics, saying, quote, "You are not thinking, you are merely being logical." This is in reference to the commander's concession that the physics of altered human consciousness cannot be simply grasped by the use of logic alone. He calls this left brain linear thinking. To understand the gateway process, the commander encourages right brain intuitive insight to get a grasp on the concepts, though he claims that after this, the concepts will stand to the test of rational critique. Though he wanted to avoid judgments based on occult or dogmatic frames of reference, he found it necessary to retrace his steps to take a look at their potential impact on mainstream belief systems. And here's a part that gets a little hairy to me, especially when you consider that it is the government talking about stuff like this. So he found in his conclusions that these concepts, quote, do not do any violence to the fundamental mainstream of either Eastern or Western belief systems, end quote. He wanted to make it clear that people will mistakenly reject this information in the belief that it contradicts their belief systems, though this information does not do that. So his findings do not interfere, basically, with any religious beliefs currently, mainstream ones, anyway. He also thinks that people are going to ignore that anyway. It sort of struck a nerve with me a little bit, this part, because why even mention how it will affect the masses? I mean, I guess that's kind of the point of keeping something classified, right? But at the same time, the fact that this is so much in their thoughts is concerning, because how much are they actually swaying? How much information are they releasing to us to prevent mass hysteria or cause it? This is only a sliver of information. There could be a lot more, papers that they aren't showing us. So this is just the one that they're choosing to show us, maybe because it doesn't interfere with any mainstream religious beliefs. These are questions that I would love to have somebody on in the future who knows more about this kind of thing to educate me on. And I would love for all of us to talk about it, maybe on the Facebook page or something. This in particular is a subject, it's part of the reason I chose to do the CIA stuff, because I kind of want to know why they choose to declassify certain things and why they choose to essentially destroy other things, which they've done. I think they destroyed a lot of MK Ultra records. Could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure they did. Anyway, stuff like that. Moving on. That was a fun tangent. He claims this paper isn't designed to be the last word on the subjects, but hopes it will build a sturdy foundation for research in this area moving forward. Okay, moving on. Introduction. So basically, the gateway experience is the achievement of altered states of consciousness by use of hemisphere synchronization. So when the left and the right brain hemispheres work together in a very specific way. And there's three methods that already exist that he kind of relates it to. The first one being hypnosis, the second one being transcendental meditation, and the third one being biofeedback. So I'm just going to explain these briefly. Hypnosis, according to the hypothesis of psychologist Ronald Stone at the biomedical engineering models and the biomedical engineering models of Ishtak Bentov, hypnosis is a technique which permits direct access to the sensory motor cortex, the pleasure centers, and the lower emotional portions of the right hemisphere of the brain following the successful disengagement of the left hemisphere, which is the linear reasoning, cognitive, verbal part of the brain. The right hemisphere is the non-critical, holistic, pattern-oriented side of the brain. So basically, you kind of put to sleep the thinking side of the brain to access the pattern-oriented side of the brain. The right side generally accepts what it receives from the left side without question. The left side is susceptible to distraction either through boredom or reduction to a semi-sleep state, allowing hypnotic suggestion to pass unchallenged to the right hemisphere, where they are accepted and acted upon directly. A couple of examples of this. Say you are in a hypnotic state, and the suggestion that your left leg is numb will result in an actual electrical reaction in your brain being generated that will induce the feeling of numbness, and they've measured this. Another one is the suggestion that you are happy. This will result in an electrical feedback from the lower cerebral cortex of the brain in charge of emotion, hence a euphoric feeling ensues. And then basically they can use this. This is how hypnotic regression works. So if they suggest to you that you have a really good memory, the result in the right hemisphere accessing unused information storage capacity normally reserved for left hemisphere selection and control processes. Basically, that means that old systems, that the brain would use for other tasks would simply switch to another task. So you actually would be able to access memories that you weren't able to before, just by the hypnotic suggestion of it. It really makes you wonder how much you get in your own way, am I right? Anyway, transcendental meditation. This works a little bit differently than hypnosis. It's often called Kundalini energy. Fun fact, the Kundalini energy phenomenon is what inspired the As Within, So Without logo, which includes a snake that I named endearingly Kunda. Yes, fun fact there, a little trivia. If you can answer that correctly, promo code Kunda. I'm just kidding. Anyway, maybe one day. Anyway, transcendental meditation requires intense concentration to draw up energy through the spinal cord, which results in the creation of acoustical standing waves in the cerebral ventricles, which are then conducted to the gray matter of the cerebral cortex in the right hemisphere. These standing acoustic waves are the result of the altered rhythm of heart sounds, which happen after long periods of meditation. Bentov states, the states of bliss described by those whose Kundalini symptoms have completed the full loop along the hemispheres may be explained as self-stimulation of the pleasure centers in the brain caused by the circulation of a current along the sensory cortex. Basically, an orgasm in your brain is what he's saying it feels like. And what he's talking about here is, and this is what Joe Dispenza talks about in his book, so I know a little bit more about this than I did probably a month ago, but there's certain breathing techniques that you can master that bring up energy stored in your lower three chakra centers that we just hold unconsciously. So if we can release that energy that is down at the bottom of our spine and pull it up, the electromagnetic waves up along our spinal cord, all the way up into our brain, there is something called the pineal gland that is in our brain that is responsible for producing melatonin, but it is also responsible for a lot of cool stuff regarding Kundalini meditation and all of this, which is, a subject for another time. I'm just kind of showing off a little bit. But anyway, this stuff is pretty real. I've known people who have activated their Kundalini. I've known people who've done it I haven't known people who've done it on accident, but they do mention in a second here how it's possible to accidentally unlock your Kundalini energy, which is something that's really fascinating. It has to do with vibration. So basically, how do I put this in a simpler way? So the special breathing technique creates an energy wave that pretty much goes up through your body. It also affects the beating of your heart. So when you pump blood through your bloodstream, usually it's kind of irregular, and that's normal. That's when we're in our normal brain waves, we're thinking about this and that and this and that, and our heart rate kind of goes up and down depending on what we're focused on. But heart coherence is basically when your heart is beating in such a coherent rhythm that the blood doesn't come back in on itself in an interference wave. So it doesn't like hit itself. You know how water moves and like the waves will bounce off of each other. This special state where your heart can beat optimally, the waves just sort of are in a continual flow. And that's the same thing with the electromagnetic waves. This is, as far as I can tell, they're talking about. So if you can reach this state, good things will happen to you, essentially. Although it takes most people between 5 to 7 years of intense training to be able to do this, it has been known to happen spontaneously, as I mentioned, to people with sensitive central nervous systems who are often around specific vibrations in the range of 4 to 7 hertz, such as the repeated riding in a car whose suspension and seat combination produce the range of frequencies, or a technician who is exposed to this frequency range in, say, an air conditioning duct. Man, can you imagine just being in an AC duct? Claustrophobic as hell. Just, trying to get your money for the day, and you suddenly have like this wave of energy just go through your body like an electrical, like a fucking lightning bolt, and you just have an orgasm in your brain, and suddenly you can see beyond the veil, and you're accessing the Akashic records. You see your soulmate, you see your past lives. I don't know if this is what happens when you activate Kundalini. I have not been able to do it yet. I've been practicing doing it, and if I can do it, I will say, you guys are going to be the first to know, because that needs to be documented, and I'm going to start keeping logs of the progress I make with that. Good idea, Riley. Let me write that down. I'm basically talking to myself right now. You have to understand that. Okay, the third one is biofeedback. This one's interesting. I actually have experience with this. So unlike hypnosis, which essentially puts the left hemisphere to sleep, and transcendental meditation, which bypasses/ignores the left hemisphere, biofeedback teaches the left hemisphere to visualize the desired result, and then to recognize the feeling associated with the experience of successful right hemisphere access to the desired result. A lot of law of attraction people talk about this. It's just visualization techniques. Again, Dispenza talks about creating mind movies. It's sort of picturing your ideal future. You have to not only picture it, but live it, exist in it, act like you already have it, that sort of thing. But biofeedback is called biofeedback because it's self-monitored through equipment such as digital thermometers. And in my case, I think this was probably about 8 years ago. I was younger. Of course I was younger. Anyway, I struggled really badly with panic disorder and general anxiety disorder. And I tried everything. I did talk therapy. I did medicine. That didn't work. In fact, the medicine often backfired. So eventually they got me into this something called biofeedback, which basically they hooked my brain up to an EEG and monitored my heart rate. And they put it up on a screen. And then next to that part on the screen where I can see how nervous I was, basically, because, the crazier my brain waves and the crazier my heart rate were, the more freaked out I was, the more stressed I was. So they would essentially try and get me stressed out by putting math problems on the left side of the screen and amp me up, basically. And then probably about 30 seconds of that, they would cut to a flowing stream with tranquil water, and they taught me how to relax my body and feel all the places of stress and sort of become the observer of my own responses. This is kind of a shortcut to meditation, I think. A lot of people can train to meditate, and this is essentially kind of what some forms of meditation are. But in this case, it was sort of my shortcut because it sort of gave me the power to see, okay, I'm actually relaxing. I could actually see it on the screen. And that was empowering in and of itself, and that gave me the confidence to be able to, I wouldn't say I grew out of my panic disorder, but it got to the point where I wasn't even getting close to the panic response because I had trained my brain and my body to calm down before I can get to that point. And so that was the only thing that worked for me in terms of anxiety treatment. The same sort of thing applies here. They were hooking people up to machines and sort of teaching them how to reach this state by showing them how it worked, basically. And, seeing is believing. And that's just basic human nature, and we're more apt to believe something that we can see with our own two eyes. But not only this, the subject literally strengthens the neural networks required to accomplish these things, because practice makes perfect, right? You got to practice being successful. You have to practice getting the outcome that you want to make it more readily apparent. That makes sense to me. Does it make sense to you? Let me know. So essentially, they found through this that pain can be blocked, healing can be enhanced, and even malignant tumors apparently can be suppressed and ultimately destroyed. Like I said before, it helps beginners who don't have much experience in meditation to get results quickly. So now we're going to talk about the gateway experience itself. The 3 things I just talked about were just sort of helpful little pre-gamers, I'd say, to the main event here. So here's the actual study. Here's what they actually found. Here's what we all wanted to hear. So basically, the gateway experience is a training system developed to encourage brain hemisphere synchronization in order to move human consciousness outside of the physical realm so that it ultimately escapes the restrictions of time and space. The participant then gains access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers. So, according to Melissa Yeager, a Monroe Institute trainer in this phenomenon, she said it's a state of consciousness defined when the EEG patterns of both hemispheres are simultaneously equal in amplitude and frequency. She goes on to talk about Bob Monroe's audio tapes, which can induce and sustain hemisync. So I looked for these tapes. Basically, the Monroe Institute offers free meditations on their website. I will have a link to that in the show notes. These audio tapes are binaural beats. I know a lot of you probably already know what binaural beats are. However, there is evidence to deny the claim that these work without Monroe's special headphones, which produce an electromagnetic effect rather than acoustical. I think that's a discussion for another time. I don't really want to talk all about binaural beats at the moment. I will say a binaural beat just for the sake of definition here. So if the human brain is exposed to a frequency in the left ear that is 10 hertz below another frequency in the right ear, the brain will hear the difference between them rather than the two frequencies separately. So basically, using barely audible, almost subliminal sound waves, a sleep-like state can be induced due to the brain's innate desire to mimic the frequencies it hears, so that we can encourage the brain to produce theta waves using binaural beats, in essence. So according to psychiatrist Stuart Twemlow, it's not tremolo produced in the uwu voice, it's Twemlow, I swear to God. Anyway, God damn it, I got the giggles. Okay. Reports in response to the effect of the Monroe tape system on brainwaves. Let me rephrase that whole thing because I just totally lost my own train of thought. The psychiatrist Stuart Twemlow reports in response to the effect of the Monroe tape system on brainwaves. He says, it encourages the focusing of brainwaves into narrower and narrower frequency bands. The focusing of this energy is not unlike the yoga concept of pointedness, which we translate in Western terms as single-mindedness. So basically, he's claiming that binaural beats help narrow your focus. Cool. All right. Jaeger compares the average human consciousness to a lamp, which expends energy in the form of both heat and light, but in a chaotic, incoherent way, which diffuses its energy over a wide area of rather limited depth. When hemisync is achieved, the mind acts under the fashion of a laser beam. The stream of energy is projected with total coherence of both frequency and amplitude, such that the surface area of a laser beam contains billions of times the concentrated energy found on a similar surface area to the sun. Wow, that was a mouthful and a big deal. That was a big deal right there. So once this state is achieved, the gateway process assumes that this makes the person capable of processing information not ordinarily possible to access. Usually in the form of symbols or flashes or holistic intuition. Now, I'm more interested to know about that part of it, but it doesn't really go into that really at all. And I hesitate to jump to conclusions here on that, so we'll just hold off. Modeling after a phenomenon called frequency following response, or FFR, which basically means the brain will attempt to mimic frequency patterns it perceives automatically. So if you're awake, you're in beta brainwaves naturally, but if you encounter theta waves, out in the wild, as you do, you don't. Anyway, your mind would start trying to mimic these waves by slowing down its beta waves to get to theta. Theta waves are outside human hearing, thus we turn to binaural beats. That's why we need them, because we can't mimic theta waves in a way that we can perceive them anyway. But can our brain? I don't know. That's a Riley question. There's no answer that I have. That's why I'm asking it. Okay, so we have the brain on board, but Bentov, our biomedical man, asserts that heart coherence is important as well. Anyway, Bentov says that in order for this system to work in its entirety, you need to reach a state where your heartbeat resonates at its optimal rate by eliminating what is called bifurcation echo. And this is what I said earlier, but this is what he calls bifurcation echo, which means that the rhythm of the heart naturally causes interference patterns in the circulatory system by the pressure waves hitting each other. He says a lot more concise than I do. I should have just read what he said. Anyway, by using Transcendental Meditation or prolonged use of the binaural beats, this state of heart coherence can be achieved, which means that there becomes a rhythmic sine waves pattern of sound which echoes throughout the body and rises up to the head with sustained resonance. The amplitude of this sine wave is about 3 times the sound volume produced by the heart normally. So this essentially makes the fluid in your brain resonate between 6.8 and 7.5 hertz, which is the approximate range at which the Earth's ionosphere resonates. So you're basically resonating with Mother Gaia, which is pretty cool to me. At this rate, the wavelength can go through just about anything, metal, concrete, water, etc. It's perfect for carrying telepathic signal. Please note here that it is the CIA saying that this wavelength is perfect for carrying telepathic signal. I just think that's wild. I mean, not really. What was that project they had? Where they used ESP people during the Cold War. Typey. Stargate project. It's a Stargate project, yes. I would love to do that one as well, but I've listened to some very, very good podcasts who go very in-depth in that. So I don't know if I have anything to offer that's new for the moment. But regardless, back to what we were saying. Yes, resonating with Mother Gaia and telepathic signals. Okay, so this turns your whole body into a coherent oscillator or tuning fork that vibrates in harmony with its surroundings. What does that sound like? That sounds a lot like what people talk about in the New Age world all the time. Check your vibes, bro. Anyway, you can use the energy in the Earth's field since you are in resonance with it. You can use the energy in the Earth's field since you are in resonance with it. The things that you resonate with become your reality. Wow. Okay, so this holograms thing. Let's talk about the holograms. And this is going to be the last thing we're going to talk about in part 1. I will expand more on the holograms in the next part. We are running out of time, is the thing. So holograms. Let me just get started here on holograms. To understand how consciousness can essentially leave space-time, we must consider the universe, and by extension, our own consciousness, to be a hologram. So what do I mean by a hologram? And what do I mean by that statement? The statement is not my statement. The statement is the CIA statement. So they're saying that they think that this can't be possible unless our entire universe is some sort of hologram. Because how else would we be able to travel dimensions? Basically is what it's saying. Keep in mind, this was done in the 80s, so probably a lot more research has been done into this. Maybe by the CIA, maybe by other people. I have yet to research more on the hologram theory because, quite frankly, I don't like it. And here's why. So, say you toss a pebble into a bowl of water. The water rippled out from where the pebble hit the water, right? Say you immediately freeze this water and remove this now ice disc from the bowl. If you were to point a laser through the disc, an exact replica of the pebble would be suspended in midair. Holograms are capable of encoding massive amounts of details. The key to creating a hologram is that energy in motion, i.e. the laser, must interact with energy at rest, the ice disc. If we were to break up the ice disc into fragments and then point the laser through one of the bits, we would still be able to see the pebble in its entirety. Think fractals, think the parts make up the whole. That stuff's crazy to me. That's basically a hologram. And I know this is not the best place for me to stop, but this is where my notes stop, so this is where I'm stopping. So, holograms. The idea that we live in basically a reflection of what's really happening is hard for my mind to process. It's hard to wrap my head around, which is why I don't like it, because I don't understand it. Anything I don't understand, I don't like because I fear it. Oh man. Anyway, I'm only half joking. But imagine that. We joke all the time about how this reality is a simulation. And that's not much different than a hologram. But I think what's scarier about the hologram thing to me is that what does the outside of it really look like? What is it possible to even experience that in our form? If we are a projection, I don't know. Does it look the same? Does it look different? Can you look? Do you need your senses? I don't know. That's crazy to me. Anyway, I am on board with the concepts of human consciousness being able to travel dimensions, but the universe being a hologram raises a whole lot of questions for me. And I know that's funny to say. I know that statement is like, yeah, I'm okay with us traveling through dimensions, but us being a hologram, that's where. But essentially, that is dimensional, right? Us being the small part of the hologram, the smaller part of the fractal, is basically just another dimension, right? So maybe it is the same thing. In fact, maybe that's the point. Maybe I just answered my own question. Okay, I get it now. I totally get it now. What do you guys think? I want to hear from you. We will see in the next episode if the CIA expands on their hologram idea or not, and they do. I read it. But as always, I will caution you to take these findings with a grain of good old-fashioned salt. We all know the government is capable of lying, but at the same time, these concepts have been dug into over and over again since. Joe Dispenza, hit me up. I'll leave my contact info in a minute. Please call me. I want to talk to you. I don't think anyone in the CIA will want to talk to me, and I don't think I want to talk to them. Anyway, I'm going to cut this one short now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to As Within, So Without. Visit us at ASWithinSoWithoutPodcast.com for extra content such as blog posts, show notes, and more. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future shows, you can contact Riley directly at Riley@AsWithinSoWithoutPodcast.com. And if you haven't done so yet, please like and subscribe to As Within, So Without on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening.